I don't know how well I got that set. I just wanted to show my viewers though it may be somewhat of an inconvenience towards me being a one-man pony show out here. But now isn't that just exactly what Hop In and Beach Ridge intended for me to be? Was a one-man show. You know, whenever it gets to the point that you don't have to worry about foreign enemies because you got enough local ones, homegrown enemies, right here amongst us that's living here with us, that says one thing but in reality does just the very opposite, just as some of my ancient ancestors here in America used to say, that the white man speaketh with forked tongue. They say one thing, but then they do something totally different. You know, as I was taking down this flag, that I'm very, very thankful that some idiot hasn't come out here and purposely sabotaged it or taken spray paint and painted it or maybe even caught it on fire or whatever. I'm really humbly grateful that nobody had the gall of coming out here doing that like some of the other ones was doing before they wound up dying. And I didn't have nothing to do with their deaths. I'll give you 3 guesses. The first 2 don't count towards who I'm talking about. That lives within an arm's throwing distance from here, in either direction. Can't go that way because don't nothing live out there but raccoons, snakes, possums, armadillos, deer, raccoons. Used to be panthers out there. Then I run all them out. But like I said, why worry about somebody on the other side of the pond coming over here pertaining to people that supposedly hate us and wants to do bodily harm to us, whenever we have enough of that going on right here amongst ourselves? Beatingest thing I've ever seen. You know, as I was taking down this flag, I realized the old gray mare, she just ain't what she used to be. My thought come to me about Don Capps. Don Capps used to be the PE teacher over here in Sharon, Tennessee, that I guess is raised up, give or take, about 5, maybe 7 different generations. And whenever I say raised up, I'm talking about been associated with that many generations, because he got involved in the school industry at a very, very young age. And of course, as he growed and he progressed, he eventually changed from being a PE teacher to being a principal. I think maybe he might have taught a science class or something like that. I don't know. But when I first come back here, I think it was in 2015, about 7 years ago, Don Capps come out to the parking lot there, driveway, and he allowed for me to video him in discussing some things that I felt like needed to be addressed. My brother David was still living at that time. I'm going to have to do something else with this. Let me take it around this pole. That way I can stretch it and maybe get some of the kinks out of it. But anyways, while my brother David was living, we went over between Rutherford and Dyer on the bypass, and there was another individual over there that used to own the old truck stop up here in Sharon, Tennessee. And I guess it was after Sonny Davis must have lost it himself. Captain Hook, my cousin, that also owned the Top Hat, and the Three Sisters at one time, and I think another restaurant or gas station or something like that up there at Martin. But as I was undoing this, my mind reflected upon the conversation that I had with Don Capps after I interviewed not only him, but after I interviewed the individual over here towards Rutherford, that once he figured out that I was going public with my videos, he refused, the guy over here refused to let me interview him twice. Scared. Frightened. I go back to Don Capps, and I don't know why that ain't wanting to do right. I go back to Don Capps, that now has become a public figure towards being not only a teacher but a principal. Retired from Sharon School. I guess he got bored, decided to go to Fulton and be the principal out there for 3 or 4 years. Maybe he was hurting for a principal or something. But I went back the second time to Mr. Capps, and he told me quite frank that he didn't have time to do another set down, but he did question me about, you know what, Dennis, I'm really surprised that somebody hadn't come out there and visited you. And I know exactly what he was talking about as far as somebody coming out here roughing me up. Little did Don Capps know that we had already been roughed up by more than one family. You ever take about a dozen? So as I'm taking this flag down, my mind reflects upon Don Capps and this other individual over here that's got a cattle farm. And I also thought of Ronnie that used to own the hop-in store that become a bail bondsman that took $5,000 off of me in 2005. And God only knows how much more money he's taken off of people and turned it into a very, very rich enterprise pertaining to being a bondsman. Get down. Get down. Get down. But my mind also reflected upon my grandfather, Kelmer Jackson, that used to tell me stories about his father and how the public had hired him to basically help rule the roost in this area as far as shepherding this area that had been infestated at the time by either the Night Riders or Nathan Bedrick Forrest. And you know, I can really understand all them stories about the Night Riders, of the reason why that they had to use such brutality tactics on people back then. Because back then, people didn't know no better. Get down now. Get down, Tiger. Get down, Tiger. Get down. But you know, in the 21st century, in America, and it don't matter if it's this part of America or down towards Miami where all the Cubans are, or up towards New York over Manhattan where all the Dagos are, or in Chicago where all the Italians are, we've had enough time to become aware of the senseless things that at one time people used to think was fair and right, in identifying that those things are no longer fair and right. The vast majority of us has matured. But there's still pockets throughout America. East Tennessee, Ozark Mountains. Good old boys, especially the Southerns. There's a few Northerns that's just as bad. But you would think, after all the turmoil and all the hell and all the backbiting and all the bloodshed, that by now they had already realized what the dream, what the desire, what the vision actually was, going back into the land of Lincoln. As I was taking down this rope and having to teeter-totter it back and forth, because I didn't want the flag to hit the ground, being respectful to the flag, I thought to myself, you know, out of all the people that had a right to come back to this area and make a mockery out of that flag that I've just lowered, towards either burning it or dragging it down the road or doing whatever, that according to the way I understand the laws, anybody that desires to do that in America can do it. If anybody had a right to do that, I did. If anybody had a right to take the law into their own hands and go out here and be a vigilante against all these people that either have come up against me purposely, or they basically just senselessly didn't want to get involved for whatever reason. Okay? If anybody had a right to go after those people on a vigilante type scale, I feel like it would have been me. You know, all these law enforcement people that I meet, they're no longer carrying that badge. And if you're no longer carrying that badge, you're no longer carrying that protection. See, that's the whole thing about being dirty and acting into a system that is basically being fed by a syndicate type black market system that eventually it will catch up with all of you towards what has went on here. Anyways, as I had to get on that ladder and lower the flag, lower the flagpole, and I tied the flag up, making sure that it didn't hit the ground. Went over here and done the same thing. I had to go up and down the ladder probably 3 or 4 different times. I thought to myself, you know, I remember whenever I first fell off the building in 1979, in which I'm sure that as I speak, there ain't no telling how many people, especially right around in this area, wish that I would have been so mortally wounded that I would have never been able to have walked again in my entire life. And you may say to yourself, "Oh, Juby, there ain't nobody that cold-hearted and cruel pertaining to you." Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, it is. And most of them did at one time have that badge, or they still got that badge. Some of them stand behind the pulpit thinking that they're going to be protected by God, by the Bible. But as I reflected upon whenever I was in Madison County Hospital, give or take about the third week whenever I was in there, and things started leveling out with me to some degree, because the first week or two at the age of 19, having 2 broken legs and 2 completely, totally crushed ankles that was just in splinters. I remember one morning about 9:30, 10 o'clock, I'm sitting there watching TV, and of course they keep you fairly sedated because of all the pain, towards being all crippled up. And I remember the doctor coming in, and he started rubbing my leg this way, rubbing my leg that way. And then he gets down. Of course, keep in mind, I had both legs in traction with weights pulling down both of them with ropes and pulleys. And I had to stay in that position for 6 weeks before I healed up enough that the doctors felt like that I'd be all right to be put into a wheelchair and set up. In the meantime, I had to have a bedpan. Sometimes I had to have a catheter. Had to get sponge baths all the time. I remember the doctor got down by my ankle and started rubbing on my foot. And at first I thought, well, he's using a different technique. This is kind of cool. This is almost like therapeutic massage or something. And I could tell that he was heavily concentrated on whatever he was thinking about. And then all of a sudden, without a word, took his left hand and placed it against the calf of my leg, and took his right hand against my foot with my toes sticking straight up, and goes, ugh, and re-cracked my leg again. Whenever he done that, I literally almost pissed all over myself of realizing that that same aggressive pain, that endless pain that's driven through not only the skin but the marrow of the bones, had now been agitated, flared, use whatever word you want to use, aggravated again. Of course, he knew what he was doing, and he immediately had a nurse right there beside him that already had a syringe with morphine in it. And the first thing they done was give me a shot to settle me down, because I had done already become ecstatic. That was a very, very painful situation that I went through in not only the initial thaw, but as I aggressively learned to walk all over again and heal up as I was going. And finally, about 2 years, I finally laid down the crutches and I could use a cane. And about another year and a half later, I began to walk in my own independence, even though I had to go back to Memphis and have my right ankle fused, completely fused to where the foot basically is, the foot and the leg, the foot bone and the leg bone is basically all one bone. In other words, I had trouble out of this right leg, and I guess the reason why is because I'm right-handed, and whenever I fell directly down, I'm pretty sure I put more aggression on this right ankle than I did the left ankle, so it done more damage to the right ankle, even though I fell straight down because I was right-handed. But as I was getting off the ladder, thinking about those things, and I realized these things ain't pleasant to think about. I thought about my father, him being very, very abusive. I thought about, the time that, and there was probably thousands of times that he lost control of his emotions to the degree that he just basically flew off the handle. But I remember whenever my two brothers come in late towards my father, going outside and getting a black round extension cord and beating them two boys like he was literally beating a horse or a wild animal. He beat them and beat them and beat them until finally he quit beating them. But the pain was already there. The damage was already there. A matter of fact, it was so extensive that he refused to let either one of them get on the bus. He kept them at home for over a week to make sure that all their scars on their faces and all over their body healed up before they got back on the bus. And then my mind reflected upon once more my grandfather, Elmer, that told me about his father, that the people had hired to be basically a judge or a dudiator in this region. And this was after David Crockett basically told the people here in Northwest Tennessee that they could all go straight to the jumping off place, that he was going to Texas to fight for our independence, in which he did. This was after the Civil War. This was after the Revolutionary War. That they hired my grandfather that had a facility over here, a store, an old store. It was kind of narrow, but it was real long. Whenever you went into it, the floors was all buckled, when it kind of rolling, and as you walked, you could hear it squeak a little bit, and over here, and the old squeaky type screen door, the old cash register, that you had to tap on each button. I don't even think at the time that he even had the roll on his cash register. I think it was all by that strip, but I don't know for sure. It may have had the roll. But I remember my grandfather telling me how that he would have to have court, open court, in the early 1900s, leading up until basically the 1929 Depression, in which I know whenever I say all this stuff, to a lot of people, they just can't relate to this. They can't relate to the hardcore living that was in this area at one time, and how cruel and how indifferent and how mean-spirited that people actually was. Like I said, right down the road here, less than about 35, 40 miles, they had the Night Riders. If you've never heard of the Night Riders, please look it up at Reelfoot Lake. That basically was a type or a form of a vigilante type law that would go around and hear of people that was mistreating their families, being a lowlife, no good for nothing, whatever, that was beating his family, raping his daughter, wouldn't work, wouldn't provide for his family. They would come and visit that person one time and one time only. Going back to what Don Capps had to say, I'm surprised somebody hadn't come and visited you. And they would give them one warning and tell them, if we have to come back, we're not coming back to talk to you. We're coming back to wear your ass out. And it wasn't nothing uncommon for them to tie somebody to a tree and literally take a whip like you would whip a horse back years ago, or a whip like a cow whip, and literally whip the hide off of their backs and tell them that the next time we come back, we're going to kill you. Don't make us have to come back. That was the Buford Pulsar type structuring of the lawmen during the time whenever people was really, really cold-hearted and really, really, really brutal. But the thing about that brutality, it bled down to generation to generation to generation. And I was raised up in that latter part of that generation, right here in this area, where people was very, very prejudiced. They was against any type of blacks coming into this area. They degraded them, and if they moved into this area, they either found a burning cross in front of their yard or a hangman's noose hanging from usually a tree or a porch or something like that. As I was feeling of this rope, taking this rope and going around the flag, understanding how that society basically turned on my grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, to the degree that after World War I, things started changing all over the world. That basically started right over there in England and Europe and etc. That we was going to handle things in more of a dignified, professional way. And all of a sudden, after the Great Depression hit, and my grandfather and grandmother at the time, which was basically in their late 20s or early 30s, that done already had, I think they'd done already had the biggest part of their family, but they had to go up north to make a living. That basically my great-great-grandfather that went around literally using this right here to justify justice with, by stringing up people that deserved to be strung up. Keep in mind, they would hang you in that day just for stealing a horse. So you can only imagine what they would be doing right now pertaining to the rapes and the killings and the school killings and all the other craziness. Like last week, they shut down Memphis, Tennessee, basically told everybody to stay indoors, declared basically martial law on a whole group of people. I don't know if it was the whole 650,000, but it was a group of people, kind of like similar, of course, how they done up there in Boston with the pressure cooker bombers. During the time that somebody was going around shooting people and done killed 3 or 4 people and shot, I guess, about 8 or 10. Just to be shooting, just to be shooting. If we was living in that same time zone where my grandfather was living, my great-great-grandfather, that had to go around being a duty-ator and have open court, and they didn't pull no punches about how that they felt. They didn't pull no punches about if you got sentenced to death pertaining to capital punishment. It wasn't none of this haggling. It wasn't none of this appealing. It wasn't none of this stuff about psychological, emotional stress. Well, his father talked down to him whenever he was a child, or this happened or that happened, and we can't hold this individual accountable for their actions towards using capital punishment against this person because it's inhumane. Well, that's what the psychiatrist convinced all the lawyers, that turned it into a money game. Money game. Nothing but a game. All about money. Wasn't about justice. About who had the biggest pockets. if that type of proceedings that's going on today was to have been going on during the time in the early 1900s that my great-grandfather, less than a quarter of a mile away from here, if that bunch of people was living today, they would laugh our courts completely. Get down! Get down! Get down! Get down! Get down! These cats are wanting to get up there where that light is. My grandfather would literally, that whole group of people would literally laugh. Judges, federal judges, district attorneys, public attorneys, prosecuting attorneys, Tommy Thomas, Tommy Moore, Judge Pence, ex-chief David Moore. They would literally laugh them people completely out of the county. They would run them out of the county. If not, they would tar and feather them because they did not supply sufficient, adequate means for the people. My grandfather was working for the people. He was committed. He made a sworn oath. I'll do what needs to be done to bring law and order into this area. His wife was a midwife. She probably helped, ain't no telling how many other families around here from A to Z to be what they are today. Do you think that I get any type of recognition for anything that my ancestry done? Nope. If anything, I'm still drawing the same type of punishment that my great-grandfather received, and even my grandfather received, and my father received, towards how that the community turned their backs on James Robert Jackson and James Robert Jackson's family. And some of them people still living, like the Whites, the Bakers, the Freemans, the Simmonses, the Mackrights, the Hazelwoods, the Cobles, the Halls, the Coopers, the Morgans. I could go down a really long list. The Neals, the Crosses, towards how many people knew about the unjustfulness that was going on with my family, but nobody was willing to stand up against it. Somebody's coming by here. See, they spy on me. A while ago, somebody come by because I done already made an announcement that I was going to bring the flag down. They're spying on me. But they're not spying on me to help me. They're spying on me to ruin me, to finish me off, to call me a joke, to bring judgment against me, to bring condemnation against me. That's what I'm dealing with here. And been dealing with now since I've come back. Since I come back here in 2014, they literally drove my brother off into an early death. But as I felt of that rope, you know, and I'm tying that flag around and around and around. I'm thinking of my dad. I'm thinking of the things that Don Cap said to say. I'm thinking of what actually occurred down here towards basically a pile-on. I'm thinking about what my grandfather done, because at that time that was the proper way of doing things. Even though basically this community turned against him, because they had already done a roll in the degree that the South had done already basically surrendered. They'd done already come to the conclusion that they wasn't going to be able to resist the Union, and that they was going to have to accept the American flag rather than the stars and bars, rather than the battle flag. And society at that time was in the middle of a roll, and they claimed that they was becoming civilized. But as they was becoming civilized, they was becoming judgmental, and they was becoming very, very hateful, in the degree that they actually turned on my great-grandfather and looked down upon him, even though he was doing what was required for him to do during the time that he was doing it. See, people has a tendency of forgetting the good times. They have a tendency of forgetting the good stuff pertaining to a midwife that went around here delivering babies way before the doctors ever got into this area, way before medicine was ever controlled by the government, way before other things was going on. People relied upon people to survive. And today, we're supposed to rely upon the system, even though it's broken. We're supposed to rely upon the insurance companies, even though they finagle on their agreements with their customer base, especially if it's something big. We're supposed to rely upon the doctors. We're supposed to rely upon the light company. We're supposed to rely upon Walmart as far as it being a trading house now. You know, it used to be that the homestead, Otasco's, used to supply nothing but hammers and nails. Co-op provided for the feed. This one provided for this one provided for that. And now they started putting whole towns, a whole town under the same roof. In which there's nothing wrong with that, pertaining to conveniences. Sam Walton come up with a good idea, didn't he? Until his family reneged on his promise and sold us out. I try to make my word good in that in which what I have asked myself to be a part of. My son, that's got his own life, I have never wanted to dominate his life. I have never wanted to boastfully be a bully in his life. And I support anything that he does. I'm so proud of him that he made a conscious choice today of asking a young girl from Ukraine to be his wife after he had already went through a bad divorce and she had already went through a bad divorce. I'm so proud of him that he has stood on his own feet and he got out of this particular obsession or this particular disease. I realized that with him being raised up in Memphis wasn't much better. Being raised up by the Arabic community wasn't much better. But at least it got him out of this haunting demonic spirit to where almost everybody and their brother literally thought the same, just like Don Capps. Well, I'm surprised somebody hadn't already come down there and give you a visit, Juby. Little did he know that they already had. Little did he know that it had already become public, pertaining to making the Hop In Cydonia news as well as the Weekly County news pertaining to how that they was purposely trying to bring ruin and finish us off, beginning with my great-great-grandfather, leading to my great-grandfather, leading to my father, and now leading to me. Now, if that ain't an American story, I will kiss your tail and give you 30 minutes to draw a crowd. Because it's basically the exact same thing that the Europeans done to the very person that supposedly discovered America, Columbus, that whenever he went back, they were so disheartened by him, in which I realized he was a drinking man. He wasn't no saint. But for him to die proper towards being a broke individual, and I think somebody actually had to buy a headstone and a casket for him. If you think about it, Jesus Christ was a pauper. Jesus Christ didn't own his own headstone, his own cemetery, his own place to be considered a tomb. That was given to him. All these people with all these grand ideals, that's got all this money and all these nice cars and all these big bank accounts, now your world is starting to crumble on you. Just today I looked at the news out in California where they have went from one extreme to another. They've either went from extremely hot and dry to the point that there was massive flooding and flooded cars and mudslides and what we're seeing is that on a level everywhere, all over the planet, pertaining to the characteristics of global warming. It was this bunch that said global warming didn't exist. They was global warming deniers. Just like they was deniers of the Windmill Ministries missions, even though it was God the Father being led by the Holy Spirit that directed me in my grandmother's house of fasting and praying and making 9 cassette tapes that was sent to the White House that helped Ronald Reagan establish what he established pertaining to the ending of the Cold War and giving all these other countries and all these other nations a fair chance towards coming up similar towards how that we was. It's as if everybody jumped out into the playing field all of a sudden towards wanting the things that the Western world has. They wanted telephones, they wanted nice cars, they wanted nice roads, they wanted nice parks, they wanted hospitals, they wanted good air conditioner homes, they wanted heated homes, they wanted running water, they wanted telephones, they wanted cell phones, etc. Everybody jumped out into the center of the playing field. We want what the Western world's already got. So in the meantime, all the younger generation gets beat out of their opportunity towards becoming loyal to a company because now all the companies has gone south. And whenever I say all, I'm not talking about completely all. But I grant you, today, if I was a teenager or in my 20s, and let's say I was a factory worker, but I was looking for the best factory to work at towards making the best money, since Goodyear up here in Union City is closed, I would either have to drive to Humboldt, Trenton, or Jackson just to be able to make a decent wage. It's really, it's intensely sad towards what has occurred here. The reason why that I wanted to make this video to verify that the flag that I put up before the 4th of July has stood its time towards doing what needed to be done, and hopefully that cat will not knock that phone off, that camera going. And now the time has come for the flag to come back down. I just wanted to show my viewers that my word was good towards me doing that in which what I had committed after making another video today on Facebook and saying what I needed to say and making a commitment towards bringing the flag down. I appreciate your time for listening to me. I realize that I kind of hit and missed on certain areas. You know, you can take this conversation for whatever it's worth, pertaining to my family, pertaining to my son, pertaining to my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, pertaining to the community in general. You can take all this stuff and put it all together if you choose, especially the conversation with Don Capps and other type of people that I've been acquainted with all my life. And you can try to make sense out of what I just got through saying. Or you can say, you know what, this individual, he's scatterbrained and he don't know what he's talking about, and he's just bouncing around from one extreme to another. Well, maybe I am in your eyes and in your heart and in your mind. But whenever you have a mind that can oversee this, and this, in other words, multitask, and I don't know, maybe I've been blessed with such of a extraordinary developed mind to the degree that I can see different angles at the same time, kind of the way that Einstein looked at things. Or maybe it's been a hindrance, because obviously the people around here, they didn't believe in the things that I was telling them. Going back 30 plus years ago, they didn't believe that in which about global warming. And as we see the occurrences steadily increasing, we know now, proof is in the pudding, that the older generation that at that time was in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, that now are in their 70s, 80s, and some of them in their 90s, realizing, oh my God, there really is something to all this, isn't it? Sadly, it is. And sadly, it has taken this much pain, just like the doctor that come in there and re-crack that same broken leg again. Endlessly, it has taken so much pain to push us, drive us, herd us off into this corner where we are today. And we're basically at the crossroads. It's a time to reflect. Queen Elizabeth II, God bless her soul, may she rest in peace, is no longer with us. King Charles III has become the ruler over that area pertaining to the monarchy. And basically, we're just taking it day by day. In the meantime, I'm going to roll things up here that I have made a commitment towards, and I'm going to put this American flag that I'm so proudly of, and our original Constitution and our original ancestors towards what that they believed in, towards the dream of the Lincoln Project. And I'm going to wrap this up and going about my hunky-dory business right here at 10 minutes till 10. Thank you for your time. I hope I haven't offended nobody by talking the way that I've talked, but I'm just speaking from my heart. And whenever people don't listen, they have brought this upon to themselves. They have no one to blame but themselves. No one to blame. No one to blame. And the cat knocked my telephone over to the degree that I was talking and couldn't nobody even see me in my expressions that I was making there towards the latter part of this video. And that's all right. It's all good. Anyways, good luck to all of us, and shalom. and may heaven help us all.